back to my channel. Today I'm going to be telling part 2 of my story. So we left off when I was 7 years old and when my mom gave us up for adoption. So at this point my biological dad was in jail and I had no contact with him whatsoever. So my biological mom kept in contact with us throughout all the years and still had visits and everything. Now when I was 7, they decided to separate me and my sister because of behavioral issues and just a lot of different things. They thought it would be better if we were placed separately. So I went to the foster home I would be at until I was 18 when I was 7.5 years old. Now this foster home, this is where the system failed me. I don't know how they got away with everything they did, and I don't know how the system didn't figure it out, honestly. So while I was at this foster home, they treated me differently than all the other kids. They were very mean to me. They would say things to me like as young as 8 years old, like that they have to love me but they don't have to like me, that they wish they could return me, that that when I'm 18 I'm being kicked out, that I'm the worst child ever, and everything else. All because I had autism and I would like have meltdowns and I had really bad anxiety and would have panic attacks, and also because of my past I would throw temper tantrums because I didn't know what was going on. No one told me what was going on. And I just wanted to go home to my parents and my family. And they seemed to not understand this at all. So, I don't know. But they treated me really badly. And then when I was 13, I got tested for autism. I was diagnosed with autism, complex PTSD, ADHD, and something else. I was diagnosed with all those things when I was 13 years old. Now, the only things that they even acknowledged was the autism and PTSD. But they would tell me that my PTSD isn't that bad and I can't possibly remember my sister dying and I can't possibly remember anything that happened, and that I'm faking everything for attention and that I can't be that upset. So it was a whole thing. They would also try to convince me that God told my sister to die. So that's a whole thing. And they also would tell me lies about my family to try to get me to hate them. And by the time that I was 14, I was no longer talking to my sister. Now I have a fake memory of calling my sister's parents and telling them that I no longer want to talk to them, but in reality it was my foster parents who called her parents, and it's not a real memory at all. Also, other people around me, like now, have told me stories about what my foster parents would say to them and everything else, and it's just horrible. So yeah, and then after I was diagnosed with autism, they were still treating me horribly. They were still yelling at me for being autistic. I would get locked outside when I had meltdowns, which don't do that. That is emotional abuse. So don't do that. And I'd be out there for anywhere from 30 minutes to a couple of hours, depending. And they said that it was until I stopped screaming and crying. Which, as a child with abandonment issues, being locked outside did the opposite of that. Like, I don't know why they thought that that would do anything other than give me more issues. They would also have me talk to cops when I wasn't doing my homework or when I had meltdowns sometimes. And that was a whole thing. And then they would threaten to return me. They told me lies about my biological mom and tried telling me that she's an alcoholic and she's on drugs and all this, and I have fetal alcohol syndrome. Now, all of that has been proven false by records. I was never diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. And and in the records, my mom passed every single drug test and alcohol test that they had while I was in foster care. So, it's not true, but that made me really mad at my biological mom because at the time I didn't know it wasn't true. And then by the time I was 14, my foster brother started doing drugs, running away, and drinking alcohol. And he became very violent. We would have to call the cops on him a lot, and oftentimes I was the one who called the cops. And my grandmother lived in the house because she had really bad dementia. And I would also be one of the main people taking care of her because she only trusted me and one other person in the house. So I had, and at the age of 15, all of this was still going on, and I had a job 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So, because I was homeschooled. So that was a whole thing too. So I had a lot of responsibilities at a very young age. But I would have to protect my younger siblings when my foster brother went into a fit of rage and went after us. I would have to put my back against the door and my feet against the wall in one of the rooms and have the rest of my younger siblings just standing there while I protected them at the age of 14, 15, and 16 years old. And I would have to call the cops. I would also come home from work to the house being filled with cops. And I would come home from dates or hanging out with friends with the driveway being full of cops. So that was a whole thing. And they did not actually press charges until I was 16 years old. And he was finally court ordered removed from our family. So I had to deal with that for quite a while. And I shared a room with him. It was a whole thing. And so, yeah. And then when I was in 8th grade, they took me out of school because I started talking about how they treated me to my friends. And I got yelled at that if CPS gets called, it's going to ruin their whole entire lives and that I'm a horrible person. And they took me out of school and put me into cyber school. So, yeah, and I've recently found out that that's not a normal thing to do. So yeah, and then when I was 17 years old, both my grandmothers started dying, and they were both given a couple months to live. When I turned 18, a month after I turned 18, I decided to run away. Well, I didn't really decide to. I don't remember much of that night, but I remember that I just kind of up and left. And then I went to go live with my biological mom, and I've been here ever since, and it's been almost 4 years. In October, it'll make 4 years. It is the best decision I've ever made. I am so much happier and healthier now. Don't forget to like and subscribe.